We're so blessed to have you here.
Thanks,
so
man.
looking forward to what you have to say.
Appreciate that. Hey, it is great to be in Townsville because it's the only place in Australia that I know of that I can wear short sleeves on a Sunday morning, first thing, and it feels great. Okay, I live on the north side of Brisbane, and it's freezing down there at the moment. I am full Queenslander now. Like, my blood is thin, and even though I lived in places like Colorado in the past where my blood thickened, I've been here long enough now where my blood is very thin and I feel the cold. Or I'm just getting old. I don't know, maybe one or the other. Hey, my name's Jason. If we haven't met before, actually, if we have met before, it's still Jason. Makes no difference. But if we haven't met before, I would love to meet you. And I would love to get to know a bit of your story. I got to meet a couple of people before the service today, before this whole thing started. And it was fun just learning people's names and learning a bit about their story, because that's one of the things that I love to do. One of the other things I love to do, because I was a PE teacher by profession for a long period of time, I love to play games because of that. And so this morning, I thought it would be fun to start out with a game. And for those of you that were here earlier in the week, we played a game similar to this one. It's called Face Off. And so we're going to play Face Off this morning. And if at this point in the morning you're kind of trying to figure out, like, am I in church or am I at like some sort of a motivational talk? Like, this is just kind of a blend of both, all right? So if you're not used to church, or maybe you are very used to church, you've never played a game before in church, it's okay, you're in the right place, all right? So do me a favor. Would you stand real quick to play this game? I need everyone standing. And the way this works, unless you're not able to stand, and that's okay. If you're not able to stand, you can still play along, because I'll give you some modifications for those of you that aren't able to stand to play along with the game in just a moment. All right, so here's how the game works. You have to pick a direction in the room that you're going to stand, either this wall or you're going to face this wall, which is the reason why they call it Face Off, based upon an image that I bring up on the screen in just a moment, okay? So I'm going to bring an image up on the screen, and this particular edition of the Face Off game is called the brand edition, okay? You got to pick the real brand versus the fake brand, okay? Or the real versus the fake image on the screen. So I'm going to give you a practice round. We're going to do a practice round. Everyone's going to get warmed up, and you'll be able to figure out what the game looks like. Now, if you don't face the right direction, okay? So if you're looking at the screen and you face the direction that is not the correct answer, you'll be eliminated from the game. I know some people are devastated. I see some looks on faces. You're thinking, my goodness, I thought everybody would get a trophy this morning at church. Like, what kind of church is this? So, all right, so here's what we're going to do. We'll bring up the image on the screen. So here's the image, and you have to decide which of these labels do you think is the real one and which is the fake one. And then you're going to face the direction of whichever one you think is the real one, okay? So you're looking for the real one, all right? So if you're still looking at me when I get to the end of counting down from 3, you would be eliminated, okay? So if you're still looking at me, you're not sure, you'll be out, all right? So you got 3, 2, 1, and the answer is? Okay. Hey, wait a second. We got someone cheating in church. Of all places in the world to not cheat, church would be one of them, okay? All right, we got a cheater down the front. All right, now that was what I like to refer to as the grace round, all right? But unlike Jesus' grace, the grace ends now, okay? His grace keeps going, but not in this face-off game, all right? So we'll bring up the second image. Second image, a couple of diamonds, okay? Which one is the real one? Which one is the fake one? Which one is, and hopefully there's no guys in the room that have recently purchased a diamond and the person you bought it for is next to you and they're about to find out you got duped with like a fake one. Hopefully that's not the case. All right, you got 3 seconds. In 3, if you're still facing me, you'll be out. 2, 1, the correct answer is? Okay. I tell you what, it doesn't take much to get people in Townsville excited on a Sunday morning. Like, it takes hours on a Friday night when the Cowboys finally win that game and the place goes nuts. But on a Sunday morning, it doesn't take much. Just a couple of images on a screen for people to get excited. All right, next round. Let's go to the next one. Ooh, the Gucci label. Any fashionistas in the audience today that can help us with which one of these, man, they look similar. Which one of these is the real one and which is the fake Gucci label here? All right, we got some people pointing. All right, don't be helping people down here in this row over here. This is not a team sport. This is individual sport, all right? Okay, you got 3 seconds. In 3, if you're still facing me, you'll be eliminated. Sorry, sir. 2, 1. The answer is, congratulations. This gentleman just went 50-50. He had no idea, and he's still in. I love it. All right, next one. Next image. Oh, the Louis Vuitton handbag. Some of the ladies in the room, maybe you always wished you'd gotten one of these. Don't be like me, okay? Don't be like me and buy one of those ones that are cheaper and get a fake one for your spouse. I did that one time. All right, we got 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. The answer is, okay, this direction. This guy, you better buy yourself a lottery ticket today, my friend, because you are just taking a wild guess and you are nailing it every time. All right, next one, next image, the Rolex watch, okay? The Rolex watch. You don't have the convenience of seeing the hand slowly go around, you know, that smooth hand of the Rolex, all right? Here we go. You got 3 seconds. In 3, 2, 1, the answer is this direction here. Okay, let's see. Let's see. We got nobody in this section over here still in. Everyone in that section's out. He was facing that direction. Okay, we got one gentleman here, the luckiest man in the room, honestly. And then we've got a few people over here in this section. This is obviously the wealthy section of the church because they all know the real from the fake. All right, next question, the next image. Which of these plants is real and which one is fake? Now, I'm not a great gardener, and because of that, I love fake plants. They are so easy to take care of. I still water them, though. I still spritz the fake plants because it keeps the dust off them. But you've got to decide which one you think is real and which one you think is fake, all right? In 3, 2, 1, the correct answer is they are both fake, and we have a winner. We have 2 winners. We have 2 winners, but I'm pretty sure you both said they were real. Oh, okay, we'll clarify that. Hey, you've just won yourself a delicious coffee after the service, and you've won yourself the pride of saying, I won that game at church this morning. Just how incredible. What a thing to go away from church with. I won the face-off game this morning. Now, that game, it has little to nothing to do with what we're going to talk about this morning, but it was a lot of fun. Actually, it has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about this morning. But before I get to that, I want to just let you in on an experience I had about a month ago. I'm a huge fan of watching movies with my wife. We love watching films together. And so one evening, we sat down on the couch after dinner, and we started watching this film that I had been wanting to see for a long period of time. It had one of my favorite actors in it, a guy named Tom Hanks. And I love Tom Hanks. He's a great actor. And so we sat down to watch this film. And the film is, it's kind of, I would put it in the category of a journey. You know how different stories have different categories? This particular story, I'd say it was a journey. It was a journey of this man's life, kind of focused on the end of his life. And as we went through the movie, you got little snippets of his life when he was younger, and then as he got older, you got all these little tidbits about his life. In fact, we kind of got to go on the journey of his entire life. Part of the film, I would find myself kind of laughing hysterically because of some of the experiences that this guy was going through. But then there were other parts that were really serious in this journey, and I began to get a little bit more emotional, I noticed. And then towards the end of the film, I found myself sitting on the couch with my wife. I had my arm around her, and I was so overwhelmed and overcome with emotion, I was literally bawling my eyes out. And I thought to myself, I wonder what my wife Kristen is thinking of me at this moment. And I was so relieved when I looked over, and she too was bawling her eyes out. And so we kind of just grabbed each other a little bit closer as we watched the rest of this journey of this man's life, because it was a powerful, powerful story. It was just an incredible story. And when it comes to stories, I I personally enjoy stories that are kind of like a journey. And if you're not a church person, or you'd say, you don't consider yourself a follower of Jesus or a Christian, you somehow wound up here today. I'm not sure how you landed here, or you're watching online because you accidentally stumbled across this link. A lot of people that follow Jesus, myself included, I like to refer to kind of the Christian life as a bit of a journey. It's one of my favorite analogies to think of the Christian life. When I was a kid, my family, we used to read this old story called Pilgrim's Progress. And it was a story of a guy going through his life of following Jesus and all of the things that he encountered along the way. And one of my favorite things about this idea of the Christian life or following Jesus being a journey is I love this concept, this idea that Jesus will never leave me and he'll never forsake me. So no matter what I'm going through on this journey, it's almost as if Jesus has got me by the hand and he's walking with me every step of the way along the journey. That's probably my favorite way to think of the Christian life, or what following Jesus looks like. But the reality is that's not the only category when it comes to stories. In fact, when it comes to following Jesus, there's another category of stories that is actually my oldest son, Xavier. It's his favorite category of stories and favorite category of movies. And the other category is not a journey. It's actually what oftentimes people might refer to as a battle. He loves Marvel films. He loves the superhero overcoming the evil person and the battles that ensue when all of that happens. He loves that kind of a story. And the reality is, as much as I love thinking about following Jesus as a journey, the truth is, it's actually, sometimes it would be better described as a little bit of a battle. When you think historically, there are people that would say that following Jesus or the Christian life is, yes, a journey, but it's also a battle, because just like in a movie like Marvel, there's a villain or an evil one. In the Christian life, we would say that there's actually an enemy as well. In fact, historically, people would say that there are three enemies that we face as followers of Jesus. Historically, they would describe them as the world, the flesh, and the devil. And I don't have time to unpack what all of those three things are, but suffice to say, the Christian life of following Jesus, if you're not familiar with it, yes, it's a journey, but it also can be a battle sometimes as well. And here's what I've discovered. This is my experience. When it comes to the enemy that we face in this battle, this enemy loves to beat us up on the battlefield. And here's where the battlefield typically happens in my life, and maybe this has been your experience. The battlefield for me is typically up here in my mind. This is the place that my enemy loves to do battle with me, is up here. And his favorite weapon, I've noticed this in my journey, I've noticed this in the battles that I've fought with the enemy, his favorite weapon to use against me on the battlefield is the weapon of lies. He loves to use lies. Now, I've been reading about this whole idea of story a lot lately, and I came across a quote from a great book. It's called The Storytelling Animal, a guy by the name of Jonathan Gottschall. And he talks about storytelling in this way. I want to read this quote for you. He says this: "We are creatures of story," and he goes on to say, "and the process of changing one mind or the whole world must begin with," and I love this, he says, "it must begin with once upon a time." If we're going to change our mind, or if we have any chance of actually changing the entire world, Jonathan Gottschall would say it has to begin with once upon a time. And from my experience, here's what I've noticed. From my experience, when it comes to winning the battle against this enemy that I have, the evil one that's kind of out to get me, it has to begin with changing the narratives, the stories that run through my mind constantly. That's where it has to begin. My wife has this favorite little saying of hers that she loves to talk about that ties in with this concept we're talking about this morning. She says to me when I'm telling a story to her sometimes, or I'm sharing a conversation with her, she'll smile and she'll look at me and she'll say, "You know, Jason, there's a little bit of phooey in that story. And when I ask her, I remember the first time asking her, what do you mean by there's a little bit of phooey in that story? She says, family of origin impacts everything. What she's saying to me is when I'm telling her this story is, she's saying to me that, Jason, you've picked up some sort of a script or a story or a narrative along your journey that has impacted everything in your life. Because family of origin, maybe not just family, but maybe you could put in there school of origin or sports club of origin or employment, place of employment of origin. That's where we tend to pick up these stories and these scripts, and they impact everything in our lives. Let me tell you a couple of the stories that I picked up as a kid when I was growing up. I remember my school of origin. I remember one time the phrase being used to describe me as not the smartest kid in the class. That was just a little kind of throwaway line I remember as a kid. You know, he's not an idiot, but he's not the smartest kid in the class. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, not that I wasn't the smartest kid in the class, but I began to believe this lie that I was dumb academically. And here's what happens with these lies that we pick up, these stories that we pick up. Here's what I've noticed happens in my life, and I've seen it in conversations with other people. The lies that we are told, they oftentimes become labels that we hold. So for me, growing up, this, oh, he's not the smartest kid in the class, actually became a label that I carried around with me for a long period of time that reads dumb. He's just not academically that smart. Or actually, I would just say, oh, I'm not really that smart, I'm a little bit dumb. I've had conversations with other people, and because they weren't the prettiest in the school or the prettiest at the sports club or whatever it is, they began to think of themselves and carried around this lie that turned into a label that they actually would describe themselves as ugly. And so they carry around this label of being ugly all throughout their lives. Because of the lies they were told, it became a label that they hold. When I was in middle school, I was a tiny little kid. It wasn't until year 9 that I grew 9 inches in 9 months. I went from this scrawny little kid to this tall basketball player in the space of 1 school year. But because of the lies that I was told in middle school, I picked up this label of being weak, and I carried it around with me for much of my life. Not quite strong enough, not quite athletic enough, and so I just carried this label of being weak along. Some of you, when you were in school or maybe at an association or a club, you were told that you were fake, and so you just carried around this label of being fake for most of your life. I know for me, probably one of the strongest labels that I've carried around most of my life is this label of not quite being enough. You know, he's not a bad speaker. I thank you, John, for the lovely comments that you made before, but he's not that bad. But there's this other guy, he's a really good communicator, and so I just carry around this label. It's not quite enough. Or maybe instead of not enough, maybe you've been carrying around a label. Some people I've talked to have said, you know what? I actually carry around this label of just being too much. People have told me throughout the years, you're a little over the top. You're a little too much for me. Here's what I'm trying to share with you this morning, and I hope you're catching this. The lies we are told, they often become the labels that we hold. And so this morning, I want to invite you to do something that maybe you've never considered before. On your seat, or maybe the one next to you, there's a little label that we put on the chair today. Here's what I want to invite you to do. I'd love for you to grab the label, and there's a pen there next to it. If you didn't get one of these labels, I'm sure there's somebody up the back that'll help you out with one. I'd love for you to just turn over the label to the back side of the label. Not the front side, not the white part, but the back side of the label. And here's what I want you to consider. What's a lie that perhaps you were told that's become a label that you hold? Well, what's a label? You know, if Jason, we were having you and I were sitting over a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and we were just being honest with each other and saying, you know what? If I'm being honest, this is kind of the lie that I think I picked up along the way, and here's kind of the label that it's become in my life that I carry around. I want you just to write that on the back of the label. Nobody's looking over your shoulder. Nobody's checking out what your label says. Don't worry. Nobody's trying to figure it out. It's just between you and God this morning, just on your own. What's that lie or that label perhaps that you've held on to? Here's some common ones that I've come across over the years. Oftentimes I talk to people and they say, well, Jason, because somebody rejected me one time, I've just kind of carried this label of being unlovable for most of my life. I know a friend of mine one time said to me, well, because I failed at a few businesses, I just think when it comes to business, I'm a failure. I'm a failure when it comes to business because I've failed a few times at it. Or maybe you're like some people that have been honest with me and they've said, Jason, if people really knew my story, if they really knew what I was like, they would know that I just have to fake it, because if people really knew what I was like, they wouldn't love me. So I don't know what that label looks like for you, but I think it's an important question to ask. Like, what's the labels that I'm holding on to? Maybe the second question that I think is a powerful question is, what's the deception behind that lie or that label? Like for me, the deception behind this lie or this label of being dumb is that because I wasn't the smartest kid in the class, therefore I'm academically stupid. I'm just going to be dumb for the rest of my life. That's the deception behind that label, that lie. I want to ask you one final question this morning as it relates to this idea of labels and lies. And I've found this question to be a powerful, powerful question that will help you to navigate this issue of lies that we were told that become labels that we hold. Here's the question. Who has the right to label you? Who has the right to label you? To help us kind of unpack the answer to this question, I want to kind of shift the question slightly. Instead of who has the right to label you, I want to ask this question. Who has the right to label anything, for that matter? Here's an illustration that has been helpful for me. I'm a huge basketball fan, like massive basketball fanatic. Grew up playing basketball my whole life. And I remember as a kid, I used to love getting a brand new basketball. And there was one particular brand of basketball that I always purchased. Starts with the letter S. Can somebody help me out? Spalding. Somebody said it over here. The reason I love to buy a Spalding basketball is because it's the same basketball that they used in the NBA. And I was a huge fan of the NBA. I wanted to be like Michael Jordan when I was growing up, and then I wanted to be like Kobe Bryant. Now I wish I could be like, LeBron James or somebody else in the NBA. But I loved buying a Spalding basketball. Let me ask you the question. Who has the right to label this basketball? Does Spalding have the right to label this basketball? The answer is no. Because they didn't make the basketball. Wilson made this basketball. They manufactured this basketball, so it gives them the right to put their name on it. The manufacturer of anything has the right to label it. Because they're the ones that made it, they have the right to label it. I carry a phone, and on the back of my phone is a piece of fruit on the back of my phone. And some of you have now discounted everything I say from here on out because you're one of those other phone users. I'm not even sure what we call you guys, but you use the other version, okay? Who has the right to put their brand on the back of my phone? The manufacturer, the person that created it, has the right to label it. But what about human beings? When it comes to human beings, who has the right to label us? This is a question that people have wrestled with for a long period of time. In fact, I want to take you way back to ancient Israel. Ancient Israel, the third king of the nation of Israel, a guy named David, he wrestled with this question, and he helps us have the answer to it in a journal that he wrote thousands of years ago, wrestling with this question. He says these words in Psalms. It says, for you, talking to God, he's writing in his journal, he says, for you, God, created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. You may be thinking, well, Jason, I'm not sure if God manufactured me. I actually think my parents, the ones that put this whole thing together. I got to tell you, when I look at humanity and the complexity of the human body, as much as I love my parents, they're geniuses, they're wonderful people, but the complexity of what the human body entails, my parents are not smart enough to put this whole thing together. That's what David discovered. He says, you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together. I love that word. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am, look at the way he labels. God labels us. He says, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. David is saying to the one that created him, the manufacturer of his life, you put this whole thing together. You knit me together, this complex thing, and you describe me as fearfully and wonderfully made. Can I just encourage you with something this morning? The manufacturer of your life, you know what label he gives you? Wonderfully made. You're a masterpiece. That's the label that the manufacturer has given you. The one who created you has the right to label you. Now, back to this basketball. When I would buy a new basketball, the first thing my mom would tell me to do when I got a brand new basketball was what? What do you think it was? Put your name on it. Why? Because my mom knew that I had a propensity to leaving my basketball at the playground or at practice or at school, which is the reason I had to buy new basketballs often. And so she would say, Jason, go put your name on the basketball. Here's what the basketball illustration teaches us. Not only does the manufacturer have the right to label something, but the purchaser, the person that purchases something, has the right to label that thing. It's why I have the right to put my name on the basketball that I bought. It's why I have the right to put a cover on my phone that has my name on it over the top of that little piece of fruit on the back of it. I have the right, because I bought it, to cover up that label because I'm the purchaser. In the first century, there was a guy that was a follower of Jesus, and he wrote about this same concept. He was writing to a group of people that were following Jesus in the first century as well, in another city, a city called Ephesus. And there was this little group of Jesus followers, this little group of Christians that started getting together, and they had these same struggles that we have of allowing the lies they were told to become the labels that they would hold. And Paul, this first century follower of Jesus, he writes them a letter, and in this letter he helps to address this issue of who has the right to label you. Listen to what Paul says in Ephesians chapter 2. It says this, for it is by grace that you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast about it. In another letter, Paul says these words. He says this. He says, you have been bought with a price. You've been purchased with a price. And then he goes on to say, and the price that's been paid is the blood of Jesus Christ. You talk about something of value. God thinks you are so valuable that he paid the ultimate price to have you a part of his family. He says you were bought with a price, and the price was the blood of Jesus Christ. That's how valuable you are to the manufacturer. That's how valuable you are to the one that created you. And then he goes on to label us. The purchaser labels us. Here's what the purchaser says about us. It says, for we are God's handiwork. We are his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works which God prepared in advance for us to do. Here's what God says about you. Ancient king of Israel says, you are God's masterpiece. First century writer, a guy named Paul, says, You are God's masterpiece. He's created you for a purpose. You are not useless. You are not dumb. You are not weak. You are God's masterpiece, and He's created you for a purpose. See, the manufacturer has the right to label you, but also the one who saved you, the purchaser, has the right to label you as well. So here's the big question. Who has the right to label you? The answer to that question is the same as the basketball. It's the purchaser and the manufacturer has the right to label you. So I want to ask you to take your label as we wrap up here in a minute. I want you to grab your label, and I'd love for you to flip it over to the front side of the label, the white side of the label. I want to ask you this question then. The manufacturer, the purchaser, has the right to label you, then what is the label God has given to you? If the purchaser and the manufacturer has the right to label you, what is the label that God has given you? I want to bring up on the screen a number of different labels that I've pulled from different parts of the Old Testament, the first half of the Bible, and the second half of the Bible, the New Testament. Here are some of the labels that God has given to us. As you're sitting there with your label in hand, I'd love for you to consider, what's the label on the screen that kind of stands out to you? What's the one that jumps out to you right now? And I'd love for you to just write that on your label. Would you do that right now? Just write that on the front side of your label. What's the one that jumps out to you? I'm going to bring up on the screen, in fact, if you guys go to the next slide, there's a QR code. If you want to grab your phone, you can scan this QR code. Every single one of those labels that were just listed on the screen before, there's a verse in the Bible that goes with each one of those labels, and you can grab those verses and the labels that are tied to it. If you just scan that QR code, it'll drop an image on your phone that you can carry around with you and remind yourself of the labels that God gives to you. You know the label that God has been reminding me of recently? God's been reminding me of this label that He's given to me from a quote that I've been kind of just repeating to myself regularly over the last few months. Here's the quote from one of my favorite authors, a guy named Henry Nouwen. It says this, that spiritual identity means we are not what we do, we are not what we have or what people say about us. We are the beloved daughters and sons of God. So all of these labels that I carry around with me, God's been saying, you know, Jason, you need to replace that with this one label, that you are a beloved child of God. Full stop. Not because of what you do, not because of what you have or what other people think or say about you, but because of what I have labeled you. Here's why this is such a big deal. This is why this is such a big deal. You may be wondering, Jason, why is it that you've spent a whole morning talking about labels? Here's what I've experienced in my life. When I carry around these labels, I have a tendency to want to cover them up. Because I don't want people to see the labels that I carry around, and so I cover it up. For me, the jacket I tend to use is a jacket of success. I don't want people to think I'm not enough, and so I'm going to be successful, so people would think, oh, he must be good enough. Or I don't want people to think I'm weak, and so I just put on a jacket of success to cover up all of these other labels. Here's what ends up happening. I end up living a fake life versus the real life that God has intended me to live. We tend to put on these jackets and we end up living what people would sometimes call like a false self instead of a true self. We live a fake life instead of a real life, and when that happens, we're not a gift to ourselves first, and we're certainly not a gift to those around us that God intended us to be. And so I want to encourage you this morning to maybe change the label and start to label yourself with what the manufacturer and the purchaser has said about you. You are a beloved child of God. You are chosen. You're forgiven. You're not forsaken. You're a beloved child of God. Here's what's powerful about this. When you begin changing the labels in your life, it has the power to change your life. Not just your life, but it has the power to change the lives of the people around you as well. I've invited the band to come up, and they're going to sing a song for us as we finish up this morning. And the name of the song is Who You Say I Am. It's a song that is all about what God says about us. And as they're singing this song, I would love for you to just reflect on the label that God has given to you. Not the lies you were told that became the labels that you hold, but the label that God has given you on your life. And reflect on that as we sing this song together. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. Thank you for these stories. The story of David and the story of Paul and these ancient stories that remind us of this truth. That we are not what we do. We're not what we have, and we're not what other people think or say about us. We are beloved children of God, full stop. And I pray this morning that you would help us to change the labels in our lives so that it would have the power to change our lives and the lives of those around us. And I pray this in Jesus' name.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Whom the sun sets free, oh, is free. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last. Free at last, he has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. The sun sets free, oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, in my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say. I am chosen, I am chosen, not forsaken. Oh, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Yes, I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Whom the sun sets free. Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, whom the sun sets free. Whom the sun sets free. Oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
God, we proclaim that as truth, that we are childs of the Most High God. God, I pray that those labels, those lies that have been told to us, God, would just begin to peel off. That we would choose to believe in your truth and what you say about us, God. I pray this week as we feel like those lies coming to resonate again, that we would just have a look at those truths. God, that we would go to battle with those lies, against those lies, and we know your truth. Your truth defeats them. We thank you for this time in Jesus' name. Amen.